Afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? So one of the things on my channel I am attempting to do is look at other channels that talk about real estate to learn, to improve, to just do better for you. I've been getting recommendations of channels to check out. So actually I have two videos coming up, which were recommendations from subscribers. The first is the Real Estate Guys radio show. This is Robert Helms and Russell Gray. So a couple of things. First off, the session I watched was their crisis investing webinar. This was essentially a series that they are kicking off that now has, I believe, 9 episodes published. I went ahead and watched the introduction to that series. But a couple of things. First of all, I want you to know that I actually met Robert and Russell back in like 2004 or 2005. At the time, they were both in the Bay Area where I lived. I attended with Olivia several of their educational events, their free sessions at local hotels. They were pretty big in the Silicon Valley back then. They had a vertical company integrated. I remember using their firm to do a couple of our purchase loans. I don't remember which one of them was a broker, like a mortgage broker, but I remember going through their firm to get a couple of loans to purchase in Fresno. So I have a long history with them. Um, I believe they've both moved out of California. I haven't connected with them. Something in my room makes me sneeze, but sorry about that. But I haven't worked with them since the crash. They again, as I recall, they were vertically integrated. I'm sure the crash hurt them, but I think they've been doing a radio show now for 23 years. They did write a book called Equity Happens. It's a green book about that thick. I was very pleased to get it and get it autographed by both of them. I tried to find it, but I must have moved it to storage. So I generally like both Robert and Russell. So let me talk about their crisis investing webinar series. I think it's an interesting idea. They tried to relate pre-08 with post-08 because again, like I said early, I've known them since before the last crisis, and it hurt. It hurt a lot of people, themselves included, I am sure. So now what they're trying to do is they're trying to get ahead of the curve. They're trying to get ahead of this next crisis, which we are currently in, obviously. And they're putting out a big webinar series. Basically, what their point is of kicking this off is they think we're going to earn differently, work differently, and live differently post-crisis. Which, if all of that is true, really means our economy is going to be in for quite a shock and a adjustment, which is certainly a possible outcome. They're trying to give a 360 on the economy. I have not watched the other 9 episodes in the series, just scanned their channel. It does look like they're talking a lot about silver and gold here recently, which was nothing we talked about when I first got around them in 04 or 05. Russ did a talk in this session about flattening the economic curve, which I thought was interesting. We've heard a lot about flattening the health crisis, saving hospitals and all of that. I thought the idea of tweaking that to an economic curve is interesting. They talked about instead of catching COVID, not catching poverty. Again, I think that's an interesting mental shift because with every crisis comes opportunity. I've long since believed that. I've lived through it and seen it. So I think that's an interesting idea, right? Not catching poverty. I thought that was a very interesting catch of phrase. But here's the crisis that Russell went through. First off, it started with the health crisis, no question. Then there was an economic lockdown, economic crisis, no question. I would argue we're still in that. But where they're going is step 3 and step 4. And this is what I'm sure the next 9 episodes in that series are about is, are we going to have another financial crisis? If we are, where would we have another financial crisis? I think another financial crisis is certain. I think it'll be different than last time. Last time was very much burdened on individuals, you and I, with houses. This one feels to me like it's going to at least start in commercial. You and I don't own the big hotels, the big apartments in Manhattan and San Francisco. Some of you might. I certainly don't. But I think that's where this starts. So I think it affects billionaires. I think there's a lot of billionaires that are going to be hurt in this. But that could continue. So again, does the financial crisis may start in commercial? Does that eventually trickle down to you and I? That is the interesting question that Russell and Robert talk about. And then finally, it's the Fed and central bank crisis. Clearly, they are reacting by turning on the printing press on high, but their greatest fear, the fourth wave of a crisis, would be a currency crisis, where perhaps the US dollar lost its reserve currency. Again, not calling for it, but that was kind of the wave that they're talking about. Now, some of that feels skewed. Again, I have not been in contact with Robert or Russell in a decade. Only, again, looking at their channel, they seem to be very gold and silver oriented, hence probably the theme of a crisis. Again, talking your own book a little bit, perhaps, but it was an interesting idea to look at. Continuing with their 30-minute introduction, they are basically trying to put together a list of speakers that will help you ask yourself intelligent questions, which I thought was interesting, right? They don't want you to be caught flat-footed. That means basically also they're going to try to ask each speaker to talk about where are the opportunities post-crisis. That is money. Again, I think in understanding where other active people are looking is awesome. That's something I'm learning by looking at other channels. I went through a year of doing this YouTube channel with you, only looking at a couple of other players. This experiment of going out to other channels has been a lot of fun to see what they do. So that's interesting. Again, their series is really going to be two parts. The first one is what is the problem? Again, they've already published it. There's 9 episodes. They're going to define the problem. And then they're going to close with a panel, which I think just got posted. It's an hour long. I am going to look at it, but probably later in the day, about what should we do? What should we do? And then, of course, their stated goal, this is something they said way back in 2004, is we want to do education for effective action, which I thought was a very, very admirable goal. And then the last thing they touched on, which I thought was really interesting, was the cone of learning. Basically, you learn the least by reading and you learn the most by doing. I thought that was just interesting because lots of you have read my book. Lots of you have interest in real estate investing, but you really learn by doing. And by happenstance, my course starts off with doing, looking at your market, building a spreadsheet, doing, calculating returns, all of those things. So I thought it was just interesting that it went there. At the end of the day, thanks for the recommendations. I do have another one from Mark Moss, which I'll do here in a little bit. Have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself.